Hello, this is Dr. Jimmy again, and this is part 7 of my History of Halloween Horror Nights 21. I'm jumping right in from where I left off. So going right into it, H.R. Blood and Guts, Holidays of Horror, right where I left off, as I gave the backstory of how Larry Kurtzberg, the actor who had been playing Blood and Guts on television in Cary, Ohio, got called in by the station manager, John Reynolds, and told, "That's it, you're done. We're not doing the horror host shit anymore. The shtick, this whole thing is over." And so he snapped. This was the last thing he could do. His whole career as an actor had degenerated into being this horror host on television, and now that was over, and he couldn't take it anymore, and he went bonkers. He went barking mad. He was totally balmy in a most homicidal way. And that Halloween night's lineup was going to be a marathon, midnight movie marathon of all sorts of horror movies themed to holidays, which actually happened in the late 70s into the early 80s, starting, I suppose, with Black Christmas, and then, of course, Halloween really was it, and then, of course, they started making films that were associated with any particular day of the year. Friday the 13th even fits into that in a weird way. And there was Mother's Day and April Fool's Day and New Year's Eve, prom night, I guess, can fit in, I suppose. You can think of that as a holiday. They had lots of films of that sort. Other Christmas-themed ones like Silent Night, Deadly Night. In fact, there's been dozens of Christmas-themed horror movies. Of course, the sequels to Halloween, and occasionally something a little bit weirder, My Bloody Valentine, that sort of thing. And so there have been films of that sort, but they decided to make fictitious films that were completely insane, that maybe never ever would have been made, maybe never will be made, that, or maybe if they were, they'd be made by trauma films. In fact, Blood and Guts, Your Name, Larry Kurtzberg sounds a bit like the guy from Trauma films, but I digress. I do that a lot, sorry. So we have all of these, and they all fit in with various holidays. So the idea is, when you go to the house, when you first arrive and you go in the queue area, you have all this lovely music, especially the Monsters theme. Dan da da dan dan da 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 da. That's playing a lot in there, and you see a sort of television screen above you. Of course, in the queue area for Disaster, they often had queue videos long after they stopped doing them for other houses. And that's because they have that big wall that you have to walk back and forth, back and forth, back and forth in the queue before you go in, and that big wall is there, perfect to project something on. So they projected little vignettes of H.R. Blood and Guts describing the movies you're going to be seeing. And of course, what he did that night was he abducted, because there was no one else in the station except him and the station manager, and whoever the poor bastard was, the cameraman, and I guess he had a gun, so he made the cameraman keep filming, goddammit, and he grabbed Mr. Reynolds, and he tied him to a chair and proceeded to torture him throughout the evening. So as you go through each movie, he's more and more tortured, and eventually he'll gouge an eye out and start to beat him about, and more. By the end of it, by Christmas, he's quite dead, lying there in the chair. And so he's doing this while he's continuing to show his movies, and in between there are little vignettes, of course, where he brings up the next holiday and continues to do more horrible things to Mr. Reynolds. Reynolds is an interesting name too. That was the last words of Edgar Allan Poe, who was also featured that year in 21. No one knows who that Reynolds was. Poe was found on a park bench, drunk out of his mind. He was in Baltimore, I believe. He was there. He was wearing somebody else's clothing, and he was near death. And when he died, he said one thing before he died. He said, "Reynolds!" Who was Reynolds? Was it Reynolds' clothing he was wearing? What happened that night? No one knows, because Poe died before he could tell anyone, and we don't know what Reynolds means. And I don't know if that's why they named the character Reynolds, because they had a Poe house the same year or not. It could just be coincidence. Who knows? But I thought it was interesting. All right, so you go in, so you see those little cue videos, and those will be repeated in the house, because as you go through the house, as you go through each different movie, because what happens is you start out in the set, And you go into the station, WKNB, Channel 21, Cary, Ohio. You enter the set where Blood and Guts does his show, and so it looks like a castle dungeon, and it's all rather camp, just like a horror host with a big throne, and there's Blood and Guts himself greeting you, and he makes jokes, and there's like a raven and a skull and a coffin and all that kind of stuff you'd have as props and that sort of thing. And then as you go into the next room, you sort of go into these little transition rooms, little tiny transition rooms that look a bit like someone's living room, or there's furniture and stuff on the walls, or it might be somebody's house in the 1970s, and there's a television set, and on the television set will be playing the little vignette for the next film. And then you enter the scene and you're in that holiday-themed horror movie. And this happens as you go from scene to scene. And so as you come out of one movie, you see another television set, and there's Blood and Guts talking about the next one, and you go into the next holiday, and you're in that movie until the end. Very neatly where they've transitioned from scene to scene. It's all quite fun, making it an anthology of these horror movies in that midnight marathon. Unfortunately, you get a better view of these videos from the queue line, because when you try to watch them in the house, the guy in black with a flashlight makes you keep moving, don't stop and watch television, keep going to the next room, go, move, 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 move. Operations. Part of the problem is operations, they get bonuses for the number of guests that go through the house, so they want to keep you moving all the time. That's part of the problem. Is you have different departments, and they're not necessarily working together as closely as they should. But that's just an aside. All right, so you go into the first, after you meet Blood and Guts himself, the first holiday. It follows the calendar, starting in not January, you don't have New Year's, but starting in February and going on to Christmas. You skip one important holiday, Halloween. I went through this house with Mike Aiello. I went through with him. It was one of those little prizes you get from the tweet-ups, which we'll talk about many videos from now. Something that was going on for Halloween Horror Nights 21, to have the whole luck thing. Are you lucky enough to get this prize? And I was lucky enough to get it, and I got a walk through along with some other people, about 21 people who've got that prize. We walked through with Aiello, and he talked about the house as we walked through it, which is a lot of fun. Very, very good. And he mentioned that they didn't do a Halloween scene because, well, the whole thing is Halloween, so what's the point? They've already done the Hallow a couple of years before, so they didn't really need to do a Halloween scene. They just had to do the other holidays. So the first holiday you go into is from February, St. Valentine's Day. And the horror movie, I don't remember the titles of all the movies, but the Valentine's Day horror movie is one of those teen slasher films. And so you're in a school, you're in a high school, and they're getting ready for a Valentine's party dance, see? And there's all the decorations up by the lockers and whatnot, but there's a mad killer, and it's this great big fat baby-like man wearing a Cupid mask, and he's wearing little tiny diapers or something, and the rest is his big fat, not very pretty body, and he's got a little bow and arrow, and he's shooting people with arrows, and his dead bodies with arrows stuck in them on the walls and stuff, and he's there, he's the killer. And that's your Valentine's horror movie. Then you segue out of that, see the television, and you go to the next holiday in February is President's Day, of course. And this time you go to the Oval Office in the White House. And here's that they recreate the Oval Office, and there's the President's desk. And on the desk is this device with a big red button. Oh my God, is that the button? Yes, it is. You push that and nuclear annihilation happens. Except, it's not a push button for a guest. But unfortunately, it had no effect there. But there's a clock counting down, and when the clock counts down to 0, the windows with the famous windows with the gold curtains, you have behind the desk, everything flashes white, and the whole room is filled with white light, and it's like, oh my God, we've all been nuked. But that repeats every few minutes. But also in the room, there's a dead guy. I don't know if he's like a press secretary or somebody, or maybe he's the current president. Whoever he is, he's dead, lying on the couch, all gory. And in the room are 2 other presidents who are sort of like ghosts or monsters or zombies. And they are, of course, the ones associated with President's Day, which originally was 2 separate holidays, of course, Lincoln's birthday and Washington's birthday. When I was a little boy in the early 70s, they decided to combine those and give you only one holiday, which was President's Day, so people could only have one paid holiday instead of two, which is a cheapskate, but oh well. Anyway, you have Mr. Lincoln with his top hat and his black frock coat and looking rather ghastly. He's dead. And there's George Washington with his white wig and his blue uniform, and there the ghostly monsters or zombies in that room that attack you as you go through. So after President's Day, you go to March, and the next holiday is St. Patrick's Day. Oh, you look like the Irish, and you're in a little grotto, and it's all green and gold and shiny, glittery stuff, and things are hanging from the walls. Oh, those are dead bodies. No, they're skeletons, and they're all gold, painted gold, like they've turned to gold. In the middle of the room, there's a great pot of gold, just like the leprechauns have, and it's all shiny, and you don't want to go after it, though that's what happens. That's when the little guy comes and gets you, and he's running around, the little man in his green coat and his hideous face. Ah! Bagora! You might get hit with a shillelagh or something. Yes, it's a leprechaun. It looks a lot like the one from the movie, but it's not the same. But there's an evil leprechaun in there, and he's protecting his pot of gold, and his victims have turned into golden skeletons. So after that cave, you go to Easter, the next big spring holiday. And oh my goodness, you're in a bright, shiny, candy-coloured room, and there's like giant peeps, those yellow marshmallow peeps, giant-sized ones up there, and there's lots of eggs and candy. It looks quite festive. You're really happy. Then all of a sudden out comes this horrific, monstrous bunny, 9 foot tall, huge, nasty pointing teeth. Ah, run away, run away. Yes, it's that sort of bunny, only it's gigantic. They call it the Feaster Bunny. Arrgh, monstrous horror chasing you out of that room. So then you get to summertime, and it's Independence Day, the 4th of July. Yeah, America. And this one, it's all a sort of a fireworks factory. Now, I asked Aiello, he said no, this isn't coincidence. But it really looked a lot like the old restaurant, fireworks factory, restaurant and pub they used to have at Pleasure Island way back in the 90s, before they turned it into a country western place. There used to be a place that was often popular with the cast members on Thursday nights, because they say Epcot means every paycheck comes on Thursday, and a lot of gay people, especially gay cast members, like to go to Pleasure Island on Thursday nights for partying after they got paid, and it was one of the hangouts. And you could sit at the bar, and if you went to the men's room, there's these big two-way mirrors, and you could actually look, and there's like windows, and while you're at the urinal, you could see the people drinking at the bar. It's like you're peeing on the bar, but you don't know that, because when you're in the drinking at the bar, you just see a mirror in front of you. And that was one of the clever things they did. But the whole architecture was like an old fireworks factory. It was all brick, and there were big, gigantic Roman candles and all sorts of fireworks and boxes of explosives, and there'd be sound effects and lighting tricks to make it look like showers of fireworks. That's what that restaurant was like. This scene in the house was just like that. It looked like the restaurant. It was the same brick structure, the same fireworks, all of it. And in there were, so it looked a lot like it, except, and I wondered if it was an homage to that. Maybe some of the people in arts and design remembered it, and in corporate, I don't know, but Aiello didn't know anything about that. Of course, back in the early 90s when the fireworks factory was active, Aiello was a young lad, was too young to go to the Pleasure Island to drink, so that might be why he didn't know about it. And they tore it down and made it into a country western pub, Wild Stallions, not Wild Stallions, but something like that, by the time he was 21, I'm sure. But you're in the Independence Day scene, and there are the scare actors that are dressed in Uncle Sam suits, with the stripes and the stripes and the blue and the stars, and they're like got fireworks and they're shooting them at you, that sort of thing. So that was that one. Wasn't the scariest room, actually. It wasn't as good as the other rooms, but it made the point. And then the next one, you go into the autumn, and you come to Arbor Day. That's associated with a lot of us who are old with Jerry Lewis in the telethon for muscular dystrophy. But Arbor Day is actually there when you're supposed to plant trees. It's like before they had Earth Day, they had Arbor Day, and it's in early September. And for Arbor Day, what they decided, it was like an old redneck woodshed, and there's like this girl who looks like Daisy Duke, with the blonde hair, or Emma, or what's her name? um, Ellie Joe Clampett or somebody with the blonde hair and the little ringlets and the flannel shirt and the, with lots of cleavage and the cut off blue jeans way up to the hips, looking like really sexy. But she's got this poor bastard, probably somebody who was doing something environmentally unfriendly like cutting down trees, and she's got him on this bench with a great big buzzsaw ready to chop him up just like he was lumber, turning the tables on people who hurt trees by using them the way people have used trees, sawing them up. See, and then you think that's it. No, that's not it. As you turn around the corner, this enormous tree, living tree, like something out of Wizard of Oz or the Haunted Forest, the great tree with branches. This horrible tree monster comes after you. So that's the Arbor Day scene. And from then you skip over Halloween, like I said before, and you go into Thanksgiving. And you're in this lovely dining room in someone's house, and it's all set up for Thanksgiving with some decorations. And there's a big table, dining room table, with the cranberry sauce and the candied yams and the pumpkin pies and the mince pies, and of course the mashed potatoes and gravy and the great big turkey. Except it's not a turkey. It's like Grandma's turkey, except it's not the turkey. It's Grandma, and she's all trussed up with like a turkey, and she's basted in golden brown and looks like she's going to be quite delicious. Oh my goodness, cannibalism! Oh, that's kind of frowned upon in polite society. And then over there is someone, perhaps, I don't remember if they're dressed like a pilgrim. I think they might have been, but they're attacked and killed with a tomahawk by Pocahontas or someone, this Indian princess, and she's taking revenge for what's been done to her people by the whites over the centuries. And of course, that had a certain personal feeling for myself. I look pretty much Caucasian, but I'm not completely Caucasian. No, not at all. My great-great-great-great-grandmother, bird of many colors, was Chickahominy, of the family tribe of Powhatan. Therefore, actually, I'm related to Pocahontas herself. She would have been my great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great aunt or something. And so I'm a bit Native American, and so I appreciate that. And so sometimes going through this scene, I'd say, vengeance for the ancestors, just like I did back in the Coven. I thought that was kind of funny. So I enjoyed that very much, the Thanksgiving scene. I remember the name of that film, Thanksgiving. And then it's Christmas at last. Camp as Christmas. The whole house is as camp as Christmas, actually. Campers are rather tents, all decorated with tinsel. You go into the Christmas scene, and you're in Santa's workshop at the North Pole, and it's all with what you'd expect it to be: all the toys, the little things, and the reindeer, and the gigantic candy canes and sugar plums, and it's all Christmas, jolly holiday. Except there's been a revolution. Yes, the elves have decided that they're going to put down the man because they've been, basically slave labor for all these centuries, and they're not going to put up with it anymore. The elves have revolted, and they've slaughtered the reindeer and the jolly old fat man himself. Upon his throne, he's there, big, fat, bloated, red body, no head. They've sawed off his head, sawed off his arms, legs, whatever. Blood splattered all over the place. There's dead people, dead elves, because there's been a fighting from those that were loyalists, and the little elves are running about with their massive happy face, quite insane, and they've got chainsaws that are red and white, peppermint striped chainsaws, and they're coming after you, and some of them have shotguns, and the mad elves are running through killing everybody. It's glorious, gory, and wonderful. I have to point out one of the elves was Beth Wicker, who the year before had, I think, started as a character as one of the hags in the Coven, and she continued to be all sorts of wonderful scare actors over the years, especially in 2012, the following year, when she invented a character that is now a true classic. And just an average character on the street, but she lifted it up. And I'm talking about a certain fox-faced, fox-masked trick-or-treater, but we'll get to her when we get to 22. But she was one of the elves in that scene, and she's just awesome, so shout out to her for that scene. Now, continuing, that's where the house ends. Now, I understand that originally they had intended another scene. Perhaps it was that terrible curse of run out of budget, or maybe someone decided that perhaps there was another reason. Whatever it was, originally Blood and Guts had been mutilating and murdering and eventually killed off poor old John Reynolds, and so he was dead by the time he got to Christmas. And the police then, as he had no live hostages, then descended upon that little TV station in Cary, Ohio, and the last scene originally was the police coming in, and the sirens and guns, and poor old Blood and Guts is riddled with bullets and is killed at the final, and that would have been the last scene. That scene was not there. They did not do that. That was what they had planned, though. I was told about this, of course, later on. Again, I went through the house with Mike Aiello, but they chose not to do that scene at the end, right? So perhaps they decided that was not what they wanted to do. Perhaps they decided if they kill off Blood and Guts, he would never be able to return. Because now, there's always a possibility that someday we may see H.R. Blood and Guts again. When? I don't know. Maybe as early as this year? Who knows? I don't. But someday we may see Blood and Guts come back in some way. I would really love to see that. Many people have wanted to see that, and they have speculated about that leading up to Horror Nights every damn year since 2011. Will Blood and Guts come back? Will he be the actual icon? That's something people have wondered or hoped for, but we don't know. I'm actually past 20 minutes, but I do want to wrap up Blood and Guts. So, let's see. Here it is. This was the cocktail for H.R. Blood and Guts Presents Holidays of Horror. I created a cocktail that would be festive and camp as Christmas. It contains Goldschlag with little gold bits of that for St. Patrick's Day, cranberry juice for Thanksgiving, and what else was in the damn thing? It says here, citrus vodka, yes, and it was done up, as you can see, served straight up in a martini style with a lemon twist. And that was it was really tasty actually, with the cinnamon flavor and the cranberry and the citrus. It tasted like Christmas. So that was the cocktail for that house. So I can't go on anymore. I'm at 22 minutes already. That's too much. So I'm going to have to stop here. When I come back for part 8, whenever that is, I shall start speaking about the next house. Halfway through the houses. The next one, house number 5, Souls and Steam Into the Machine. The final house in the Joel's Q area. That's next time.